noticed a flickering screen, and I saw a couple of you mention it to me as well, so I think you were seeing that too. So we tried to solve that technical problem right here at the start, and we think we have it solved, but I wanted to apologize for our delay and welcome you now to a webinar of overview of forensic accounting. This is going to be a great session, and we're so glad that you're here with us. We hope you've been able to hear some of our other webinars this week. This is going to be one more that we hope you find really valuable. I think you'll find that we're going to get some terrific information here. And before I hand it over to our speaker, some of you may know about the housekeeping items that we often do here at the start of the webinars. So first off, I want to get you oriented a little bit with our webinar tool here, and also mention that we do have one more webinar tomorrow. So if you haven't signed up for that one yet and would like to, take a look at that one, it's going to be some great information about the opportunities at smaller size firms. And it's really, we really feel it's important to make sure that you know all of your options available for an accounting career, and recognize that a lot of firms just may not visit your campus. You may not have the information accessible to learn about the different career opportunities. So just make sure that your search for information is very broad so that you can make the best decisions for you. And also, if you haven't signed up for Accounting Fly, do that. This will get you hooked in with our community. And like I said, our community is all about trying to help you know all your different options for making the best of your career and helping you make the best decisions that fit your interests, your background, your desires on where you want to take your career. And it will get you in the drawing for that $500 scholarship that we have. So that can't hurt, right? So make sure you take a look at that. Now, the webinar tool that we have here, if you haven't joined our webinars previously, I want to draw your attention to the question panel. If you open up the control panel for GoToWebinar using the orange button with the arrow, you'll see a section that says questions. And if you open up that questions panel, you'll see an area where you can type in anything. And the intention is for you to type in questions throughout the webinar. But what I'd like to do right now is practice. And this is great. Some of you have already typed in your school. So that means you know what I'm going to ask now. In each of our webinars, we typically ask all of you to type in the school that you attend or have attended in the past. And if you've already graduated, that's fine. You can just say, already graduated, I went to such and such university. But we really like to see the variety of schools that are represented here. It's kind of fun seeing all the students and all the representatives from universities and colleges across the United States. It's really pretty cool, actually. So Cindy, we have representatives or students from University of New Mexico, Nova Southeastern, University of Pittsburgh, University of Missouri, Kansas City, Minnesota, University of Minnesota, Texas A&M International University, College of St. Rose, University of Tennessee, Florida Atlantic, many more. And this is great. I'm not going to take more time naming off the list of all these schools, but really excited about all these various schools. So anyway, now hopefully all of you attending know how to post a question. And you probably also know the drill here, that throughout the webinar, list your questions here. We'll answer as many as we can. For those that are not answered, we will get the answers to you at a later time. Give us a few days to do that, to get the answers back to your questions. Okay? Now, I want to do a quick poll, also just to get a understanding of who we have represented on the call and audience. So you should see a poll now on your screen of what is your experience level. So also, if you've joined us before, you've seen this previously. So just go ahead and type in your questions here, or type in your answers here, and we'll close the poll very, very shortly. Okay, I'm about to close the poll. Thanks to everybody for putting in your answer. As you can see that we have a pretty nice mix over a later college, master students, and kind of entry-level talent, those who have recently graduated or at least, less than 2 years of experience, with a smattering of freshmen and sophomores in college, and also those with two or more years of experience. So that's fantastic. Great. Welcome, everybody. So glad that you're here. Okay. Let me hide this. I did want to just mention, this is really exciting to me. And Professor Michelle Randall, I saw, this is exciting. Professor Randall has her entire intermediate accounting class with us today. I just think that is fantastic and thrilling. So we hope that you get a lot out of this session, and so glad that you're here. So with that, I am going to introduce our speaker and get this on into her hands. We have Cindy Durtschi with us here today from DePaul University. And let me mention a little bit about her background. And those of you who are pursuing your academic degrees, listen to everything that she has accomplished. This is quite impressive. So Cindy has a PhD and also a master's in accounting from the University of Arizona in accounting, obviously. She also has a Master's of Arts from the University of Nevada in economics, and from the University, or Utah State University, she has a Bachelor of Science in both economics and history. So quite a pedigree with her degrees there. In addition to that, her background experience is just really quite impressive. She has main you'll have to tell us if that's still acceptable and if you recommend them taking a look at that. And she also continues to publish in forensic accounting cases that are used in classrooms all around the world. So pretty cool that we have her here with us. She's published in forensic accounting as well as capital markets. Her articles have appeared in the Journal of Accounting Research, Journal of Accounting, Auditing and Finance, Journal of Forensic Accounting, Issues in Accounting Education, among other journals. She's currently on the editorial board for both the Journal of Forensic and Investigative Accounting and Issues in Accounting Education. She's given invited lectures in forensic accounting to professional and student groups throughout the U.S. and in Europe, and she currently serves as president of the Forensic and Investigative Accounting section of the American Accounting Association. Sorry for my stumbling there. There's just so much to read about her background. My tongue got twisted a little bit, but very impressive, and I think we are extremely fortunate to have her with us today. So with that, Cindy, I'm going to hand it over to you, and can't wait to hear what you have to say.
Thanks, Deanna. I'm glad to hear I'm not the only one that has a hard time saying the word investigative. So I'm going to talk a little bit about forensic accounting today, and you can see from this first screen that's up here, this is from the AICPA and their Forensic and Litigation Services Committee, that forensic accounting involves not only all of the accounting you've ever learned in school, but some other fun stuff as well. So for example, law, research, investigative skills, and the ability to analyze and evaluate evidence and interpret it and communicate it in usually a legal setting. So in the next few minutes, we're going to talk a little bit about why studying forensic accounting can help your career, and then I'm also going to look at a few fun forensic accounting topics that can be of use. So we're going to talk a little bit about reading people, a little bit about linguistic analysis, in other words, analyzing what the words people choose to determine if they're telling you the truth or not. And then we're going to talk a little bit about net worth analysis and how we use that in forensic accounting. But along the way, I'm going to show you how to get rid of all that student debt and get wealthy. So first of all, why study forensic accounting? There's a lot of employment options for forensic accounting. There are out there now a lot of forensic accounting firms, and all the big audit firms have forensic accounting divisions. There are also litigation support firms out there, and the big one, I have it listed last, but it's certainly not least, is law enforcement. All kinds of government agencies and law enforcement use forensic accountants or bring forensic accountants in, like the FBI, the IRS, and the DEA, the ATF, all of those alphabet soup of government agencies. And the reason that they use forensic accountants, or like people with an accounting background, is that there's so much white-collar crime now, and then even tracing terrorist money. All of these things require accounting skills that they generally don't teach in general law enforcement training. It's also useful in any normal audit, because taking forensic accounting increases your level of skepticism, increases your interviewing skills, and I also like to think of the brainstorming sessions that we're all supposed to do now in an audit, where you're supposed to come up with some ideas of what kind of frauds might possibly be committed in a firm. That's hard to do if you don't know what kind of frauds there are out there to choose from. Also, there's life skills. It is very helpful, no matter what you do in life, to be able to tell if somebody's lying to you or detect fraud in real life. And so a lot of these skills that you learn in forensic accounting can be applied in your everyday life. So the AICPA, in their core competency framework, had a very interesting phrase. They said individuals entering the accounting profession should show effective problem-solving and decision-making skills, good insight and judgment, as well as innovative and creative thinking. Now, the reason I find this interesting is these are not things that are generally tested on the CPA exam, and in accounting classes we have so much accounting content that we need to teach that it's really hard to be able to work these softer skills in. And yet all of our employers say that they want accountants who display these skills. So a CPA gets you through the door, but these soft skills that they have time to teach you in forensic accounting are what's going to make you successful in your career. So what do they mean by effective problem solving and decision making? Well, what it boils down to is, unlike in accounting problems where often you go to, say, a problem at the back of the chapter and it has all the information you need, all the numbers are there kind of neatly arranged, and you just have to figure out which ones to use and how to configure them to get the answer. But in real life, we often have to make decisions with incomplete information. And so also we have to be able to determine what information you need and where to go to find it. Then you need to take all of that information and put it together to solve a problem and make decisions. And you have to be comfortable with the fact that there may not be one right answer. Rather, the answer is going to depend on which assumptions you make, and so you need to be able to defend your assumptions. Now, in accounting, in forensic accounting, many of us are now using what we call the problem-based learning approach, and this is what Deanna referred to earlier. I tend to write cases using this approach, where we set problems up exactly like this, where you're given information, but not all the information you need to solve a problem, just like if you were to discover a fraud or think you may have discovered a fraud out on an audit. You'd need to figure out what additional information do I need to be able to find out if it really is a fraud or if it's just a mistake. So what's good judgment and insight? Well, you need to be focused on more than just the numbers. We accountants are really good at focusing on the numbers, but the problem is that you can't prosecute numbers, so even if you find a fraud in the numbers, you need to find out who committed the fraud. And so good judgment and insight can be practiced when making assumptions and defending them, and also by being able to understand the people that are creating those numbers. So innovative and creative thinking, well, this is where I think forensic accounting education excels. You practice detecting fraud, investigating fraud, and then creating a case and doing expert witnessing. All of these steps require some creativity because there's no rubric that you can follow. These are the 5 steps in how you investigate a fraud. Every fraud is unique to itself. So that's why forensic accounting focuses on more than just the numbers. Because if you think about any firm out there, they generate millions of numbers every year. And if somebody's committing a fraud, so for example, they're stealing from the company, that may often show up in only a few numbers among those millions. And those few numbers are hard to go out there and find when they're buried under so many normal numbers that aren't fraudulent. But there are fewer people than there are numbers. And since people commit fraud, and people, before they commit fraud, have a reason, they have incentive, they have to have an opportunity, and they often think up a rationalization for why they did it. So often looking at the people that are surrounding and committed the fraud is the best way to find a fraud. So we're going to touch on some of the clues to finding people and reading people. The first is we're going to talk about reading people. Then we're going to talk about linguistic analysis, which is the words they choose. And finally, we're going to look at the lifestyle they live to see if that might be a clue to whether or not they're committing fraud. So the first skill, reading people. Reading people is not easy. And part of that is when we're meeting with people and talking with people, we often tend to concentrate on ourselves rather than reading the person. So think about this, when you're talking with your boss. So you're wondering what it is they're thinking about you when maybe that's exactly backwards. What you should be concentrating on is what is that person telling me. So it's important. Think about interviewing for a job. When you go out to a job, we often tend to think about, do they like me? Would they hire me? When we should actually be listening to them and asking ourselves, is this the right job for me? Is this the kind of corporation I could fit in and be happy? Are these the kind of people that I would feel comfortable with spending more hours a day than I am with my family usually? And so when you're on an audit, you ask questions. You have come across some problems or some issues and you go ask questions. Rather than concentrating on getting the answer right, you need to ask yourself, are they truthfully answering this question or are they being somewhat evasive? Prospective clients, do they like your presentation? Is there some adjustment you should make? If you're presenting to your boss, do they agree with you? If you're interviewing people suspected of fraud, are they telling the truth or lying? And quite frankly, life in general. It's nice to know, be able to read people, your family, friends, strangers. Finally, accountants are often what I would call the corporate policemen, whether they're internal auditors or external auditors. And so you need to be able to spot bad actors sooner rather than later. So throughout this, I'm going to be giving you can go back and look at these slides later, I'm going to be giving you some books that you might go to for additional information if you're interested. This particular book was written by two people, but this Jo Allen Demetrius, I just want to mention her first. She's a jury consultant that helps select the O.J. Simpson jury, the Night Stalker jury, and a lot of juries, for high-profile cases. So her job is all about reading people. If I'm working for one side or the other, are the people I choose to put in the jury the kind of people that will be sympathetic to my side? And when she talks about reading people, she talks about this potential for misunderstanding. And we all know this. 80%, there's an 80% chance of having a misunderstanding if we're using email. That's why we have emoticons, right? We make a joke or we're sarcastic in an email, we better put a smiley face on there or somebody's going to think we're serious. That drops down to 37% when we're talking to someone face to face because we can hear the tone of their voice, we can see the expression on their face. And so what she says is practice and push yourself to communicate one or two levels above what you normally do. So rather than sending a text message to someone, especially if it's something sensitive, walk down, see them face to face, and talk about it, and you'll have a better chance of not having a misunderstanding. So the other problem with reading people is we tend to make first impressions quickly. And once we've made this first impression, our minds tend to filter out any contrary information. This is called officially confirmation bias. So what that means is we look for information that confirms what we think and sort of ignore that information that doesn't fit with what our first impression was. So the way we help ourselves with this is when we meet someone for the first time, just remind ourselves, this is our first impression. And any first impression is merely a hypothesis. It's not the end. It's not the end all. And so then we test our hypotheses over time. So, and ask ourselves, was it based perhaps on a stereotype? All blank are good or all blank are bad. Is it based on emotional needs rather than known facts? So think about this in a job interview. If you really, really need a job, is that longing for a job and that panic that I won't get a job overriding your ability to read these people and find out if it actually is the correct job for you? Is it based on superficial details? Maybe the way they dress, their race, their gender, maybe their religious affiliation or political affiliation. Ask yourself, have I asked questions and really, really listened to those answers? And then, are the answers consistent? And do they make sense? So is the answer you get on day 1 the same as the answer you get on day 5? If not, that's something that you should make a note of, at least in your mind, and maybe come back to it later and revisit that hypothesis. And finally, and this is very important, observe their actions and test them against your hypothesis. You've decided somebody's a really nice person, and then you start noticing their actions. Do you maybe need to revise that hypothesis? So over time, just keep gathering data and testing your hypothesis. And number 2 here is really interesting. Don't make verbal or monetary commitments too soon. The minute you have stated an opinion out loud in front of other people, in many ways, psychologically, you lock yourself into that opinion and you feel that you need to defend that opinion. And the monetary commitment, this one always makes me laugh. In any kind of fundraising activity, if someone can get you even to commit $1, then all of a sudden you have made a commitment and you are going to be more likely to favor them and, sort of filter out unfavorable evidence. Avoid pressure situations. For example, if you're in a situation where you have to do some hiring and the boss says, hey, interview my daughter, all of a sudden you're in a pressure situation. You're not going to be able to make a completely clear reading. Beware of fear or intimidation. Don't let that affect your ability to read. And defensiveness. So defensiveness is what happens when you feel even slightly attacked. It's the fastest way to lose objectivity. So people use this in picking up people in a bar all the time. So for example, if a guy sees a girl across the room and thinks, oh, she's awfully cute, I wonder if I should go talk to her. Well, if he comes up to, if you're a woman and he came up to you and said, you're awfully pretty, you're probably stuck up and wouldn't talk to somebody like me, your immediate gut reaction is to say, I'm not stuck up, of course I would talk to you. And what's happened? All of a sudden you're in a conversation with somebody that you may not really have wanted to be in a conversation with. So beware of defensiveness. So what additional information should you attempt to observe? Well, once you've made an initial impression, then look for rogue traits or rogue actions. And what these are something that doesn't fit in with your initial impression. So for example, a rogue trait could be someone who dresses in a suit, very expensive suit all the time, perfectly groomed, but you might notice that they wear on their wrist a little handmade string bracelet that's not really very well made. And well, what does that mean? If you were to ask them, why is it, this bracelet that looks so out of keeping with your normal look, why do you wear that all the time? And if they said to you, well, it was made by my 7-year-old daughter, suddenly you know something very important about this person and their character. Their family is very important, and no matter what, no matter how important the meeting, they're taking a reminder of their family with them. A rogue action would be something like, oh, say you had someone who called you every day at 5 o'clock just to check on you, and then all of a sudden didn't start calling till 8 o'clock or started skipping. Well, that's a rogue action. It's out of the usual, so you should say to yourself, this is important, something's up, I wonder what it is. Also, make sure you ask whether the trait is a choice or fate. Obviously, wearing the bracelet was a choice, but fate, I'm short. That's it. So please don't make an opinion of me based on the fact that I'm short. So finally, Demetrius said, if you want to predict how someone's going to act, ask where they fall on the compassion scale. So here's this compassion scale. So on one side we have soft, which is a generous, fair, sincere, gentle, forgiving, group-oriented, patient kind of person. So we can put somebody over there that we might all know, Gandhi, maybe Oprah Winfrey, someone like that, on that level of compassion. On the other side, we have hard, which is someone who's very critical, self-centered, analytical, every man for himself, what's in it for me. And so she said everybody falls somewhere on this scale between soft and hard. And so if we were to think hard, I'll come up with somebody. I guess let's think of maybe Donald Trump. I'm thinking of him in his Apprentice show. Knowing this about these people and placing them on this scale, you might be able to predict how they're going to act in certain situations. For example, if you were a jury consultant or selecting a jury and you had some individual who is suing a big corporation because they had some faulty part and they got hurt, you probably would be looking for somebody more on the soft scale that would be more generous if you were on the side of the little guy fighting the big guy. If you were the big guy, you'd probably be looking for a juror who was more on the hard side of the scale. You'd be able to predict their actions. So reading people, are they truthful? Here's another book that's a really interesting book on spotting lies. And basically what Pamela Meyer talks about is she said a lie doesn't have any power just by saying it. For it to have any power, somebody has to believe the lie. So what she says is that for a lie, it must include a false statement or appearance. It must have somebody to believe it, otherwise you're just deceiving yourself. It has to have an intent to deceive, otherwise it's just an honest mistake. So who lies? Oh, it looks like most of us lie sometimes. So they've done surveys and found that 66% of people who interview for a new job were misled about the financial status of the company where they hope to work. 83% of college undergrads lie in an attempt to get a job. And sometimes these are egregious lies, and sometimes they're just sort of padding, over-exaggerating your contribution to something or your position in an organization, something like that. And 50% of workers in one study admitted to one or more unethical or illegal actions over the course of a year, which is pretty frightening. So what are the weapons we use to find liars? Well, we can use lie detectors, but despite what you see on TV, they're not admissible in court. We might observe facial expressions. So if any of you saw the show Lie to Me, it's based on the work of Paul Ekman, and if you were to Google him, you could find all kinds of information and even training online in how to detect micro-expressions, those little expressions that pop across someone's face very quickly that give away what they're actually thinking. Is it body language? Well, there are some things we can tell from body language, but often what they have found in studies is the more people think they know about body language, the less they're actually able to read it. We can also look at discourse analysis. These are the words that people use. None of these are the ultimate way to determine truth, but what you do is look for patterns. So here are some books that you can read about lie detection. I'll let you go back and catch these later in the slides if you're interested. But what we're going to talk about is being able to, and how linguistic analysis can tell us the truth about what somebody is really thinking or how they're feeling. So what linguistic analysis is looking at the words people use when they talk to each other. So it's taking a language sample and using one of the branches of linguistics and analyzing it. And what they have found is that we have an unconscious way of putting our words together, and that can help us find the truth. So when is it used? Well, for example, let's say that there was an anonymous post on a blog that reveals confidential business information about a company. The company wants to know who wrote this, but it's a foreign ISP and they won't cooperate. Or say you were away from your desk and someone wrote an inappropriate email and sent it from your computer under your name. So if you weren't there, you could prove you weren't there but wanted to know who wrote the email, how would you determine who did it? Well, there was a famous case where they used linguistic analysis to find the true author. And that was when the UK Sunday Times revealed that Robert Galbraith, the first-time author of The Cuckoo's Calling, was actually J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter series. So this is how it happened. Someone called the newspaper with a tip. They said, I think the author might have been J.K. Rowling. So the editor contacted linguistic specialists, one from the UK, one from the US. Independently, they both named Rowling as the author. And how did they do it? Well, each of them had a piece of software that they used. The first one, Peter Millikan, is a professor of philosophy at Oxford. And he actually studies the links between philosophy and computing. And he has a software package called Signature, which if you're interested in this, you can download it. It's online free. The other is Patrick Julia, a computer scientist at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, and he has a program called JGAP. How could you not love that as an accountant, something called JGAP? So we're going to just talk about JGAP and how it works. And so this is how it works. If you were to name that huge piece of furniture in front of your TV, the one that seats at least 3 people, what would you call it? So think for a moment. Well, there are a lot of things that you might call it, depending on how old you were and what part of the country you're from. So you might call it a sofa, a couch, a divan, Davenport. Here's another example. What do you call the rubber-soled shoes you wear to work out? Wikipedia lists at least 18 different regional names. Sneakers, tennis shoes, trainers, running shoes, keds. And so what they found that these nouns, like we listed the couches and the sneakers, and adjectives are often a function of region, age, and personality, but they also change over time as we grow up and our vocabulary matures. So this is what they found was actually more interesting. If you were to write down where is the fork in this picture, what would you say? Well, it turns out the most important word is the preposition. Some people might say to the left, or on the left, or at the left, or something else. How many F's are there? It turns out there are actually 6. What they find is that these prepositions are so uninteresting to us that most of us don't even see the F in the word of. And so many people look at this. I know I did the very first time I saw it. I counted 3 F's, and I went back and counted again and got 3 F's. I just didn't even see the word of. So they call these prepositions, pronouns, and conjunctions function words. They're not like content words, so they're not like nouns, verbs, adjectives. They're common, they're short, they're not very meaningful. So, I mean, it's like, for example, define the word of. They describe relationships between words, so they have to do with the structure, not the content. And what they find is we create them unconsciously. And so therefore, because they're created unconsciously, they might give away more about who wrote something or what somebody's saying than nouns and adverbs. Often they're so common that you can find dozens of them on the same page. And this is the most important part. They found that people's characteristic patterns of these words is stable over decades. And that's because people don't pay attention to them. They're unaware of what their patterns are, and so it's difficult to change your pattern or to imitate somebody else. So it's not like forging someone's signature. Forging the way they use the word of or to is a lot more difficult. So here are some examples of them: of, to, my, me. So if you know how often they're used and the context they're used in, what other words might have been used instead, that's what these computer programs do. So behind the computer program, what's going on? So here are some examples or traces of deception. So we're just going to touch on a few so you get kind of a flavor for it. The first one is reduced or eliminated self-references. So for example, if you said, I did this or I did that, I drove the car, I ran the race, that's the active voice. So if you drop the active for a passive voice, so rather than saying, I was in a car and I drove off the road, I was in a car, the car went off the road, all of a sudden you're a victim or a bystander rather than an active participant. So you didn't drive the car off the road, the car just went off the road and holy cow, you were along for the ride. So the next one is introjections. So an interjection is opposite of a projection, which is imagining others feel as you do. So that is adopting things for yourself, so taking things on yourself. So in linguistic analysis, this is the unconscious process by which people indicate possession. So it might be, is done by the word my. So my house, my car, my kids, that's me taking possession. Another one is me, or these marker words, so her car, the bank, but in particular me. So heavy use of me may indicate that the person sees themselves as a passive object of external events. Then she came to me and asked me to steal the money. Okay, poor me, I got talked into it, is basically what that sentence is saying. Abjurations, oh this is a great one. So this withdraws the assertion made at the previous clause of the sentence. So in other words, you may as well take a big black marker and cross it right through the front part of the sentence. It's most often is the word but. So for example, in red, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but, well, you know right now, somebody's going to hurt your feelings. Modifying or qualifying terms. This shows the speaker lacks confidence in whatever it was that they just asserted. Examples are I guess, I believe, kind of, sort of, basically, normally, hopefully. So for example, hopefully I will pass the CPA exam. That's a lot less assertive than saying I will pass the CPA exam. Psychological distancing. This is used when the writer or the speaker wants to distance themselves from what happened. So it's they, them, those people. Of all of these, they is the most psychologically distancing because it makes people others. For example, we won, they lost. Non-confirming sentences. These allude to facts that never happened. So for some reason I love these. When someone says, I started to go to the store. I started to do my homework. Well, starting is not exactly doing. They're two different things, right? I attempted to solve the problem. Did you solve the problem? No, you didn't solve the problem. I began to. Did you finish? I tried to, but did you do it? I was going to. So in other words, when somebody uses these phrases, these non-confirming sentences, they're trying to give the illusion that something happened that actually didn't happen. So those are just a few of the linguistic ideas that are behind those computer programs, but they're also kind of helpful and fun to use in real life and watching the words that people say. The next skill we're going to talk about that we talk about in forensic accounting is net worth analysis. And the reason we use this in forensic accounting is that an inappropriate lifestyle can be a red flag of fraud. And if you see somebody living far, far above what is possible based on what they make at a company, you might want to ask yourself, what part of the business does that person have access to, and could they possibly be taking money out of the business? The same sort of net worth analysis with a slight twist can be used to find if a suspect has money from illegitimate sources. So what is net worth? Well, it's our favorite, the good old accounting equation, assets minus liabilities. So just like assets minus liabilities is the owner's equity in a company, it's also the wealth and the equity a person has in themselves. So net worth in forensic accounting, well, generally criminals don't steal to invest in their IRA. They generally steal to have a high consumption lifestyle. In other words, they steal it so they can buy fancy things and go fancy places. So a high consumption lifestyle is easy to spot because everything's on the outside. All the money shows. So somebody who has a high consumption lifestyle is somebody who's consuming all of their income, and they generally have few investments. Wealth is not an abundance of possessions, despite what they want to show you on television. Genuinely wealthy people often derive more pleasure from accumulating net worth than from having an excessive number of possessions. So who's more suspicious? Somebody with a high consumption lifestyle or someone who's genuinely wealthy? Well, the truth is, if somebody was genuinely wealthy, the chances are you wouldn't be able to see it from the way they act on the outside. If you want to read more about this, go get the book, The Millionaire Next Door. It's very enlightening about what millionaires are actually like. So the more suspicious person is going to be someone with a very high consumption lifestyle. So to determine somebody's net worth at a point in time, the idea is if they were to sell off all their assets, use the proceeds to pay off all their debts, what's going to be left over? So they use this in divorce cases because they want to be able to split the net worth between a couple. They might use it in partnership dissolution. So how much is this business worth so we can split it between the two partners? In criminal cases, we can use it to determine motive as of a point in time. So what is your simple net worth? So like a business, it's going to be your assets minus your liabilities. So in calculating your personal net worth, we take the current value of your assets. So if the only asset you have right now is a car that's 10 years old and it's worth $2,500, that's your assets. Your liabilities are how much you owe. So this could be your student loans, your credit cards, whatever it is that you owe. So this is the important part. How do you increase your net worth, especially if your net worth was negative, as most students is when they leave college? Well, obviously the only way we can make our wealth go up is to increase our assets or decrease our liabilities, or even better, do both at the same time. How do we do that? Well, we need cash. Where does that cash come from? Why, it comes from the income statement. So people have revenue, or the pay they get for their job, going to subtract from that their expenses, and hopefully there's something left over. So if you have something left over from after paying all of your expenses, then you can use that to raise your assets or lower your liabilities. In other words, you have to live below your means to get wealthy. So this leads to, how can you get wealthy? So let's just say you just graduated from school and you have, like most students, 0 assets. And like some students, we're going to make this a nice round and horrible number. You have $100,000 in student debt. So your net worth is minus $100,000. That's pretty discouraging. However, you decide to make 2 choices. The first one, you decide to live slightly below your means. Enough below your means that you're going to have an extra $500 per month to pay on your student loans. So rather than getting that $1,500 a month apartment, you get a $1,000 a month apartment and decide to put that extra $500 into your student loans. The next choice that you make is you enroll in your employer's 401k plan. So you decide you're going to put in $500 per month, and it's matched by your employer. So notice that even if you put in $500 a month, now that you're working, if you're in the 25% tax bracket, which most of you will be as soon as you start working, your take-home pay is only going to go down by $375, not $500, because they take it out in pre-tax dollars. So in 1 year, what does your financial situation look like? Well, even if there's been no capital gains whatsoever, if you look at your $500 and your employer $500, your assets would be at least $12,000, and you've been making your regular payments plus $500. So I put you on a 20-year level payment plan at 5%, and your liabilities are down just under $91,000. However, if you look at your net worth, it's now down to minus $78,000 from minus $100,000 of 1 year before, even though your student debts have only gone down by basically 10. So if you spend all your money, you might have some things to show for it, but if you check your net worth every year, at the end of every year, all of that money that you've been sacrificing and putting towards your student loan is going to show up right there rather than a possession. How about 4 years down the line? Well, now we're going to let our $1,000 a month grow at 6%, which is average for if you were investing that money in the stock market. And so now your IRA after 4 years is up at $62,000. Just putting in your $500 a month and being matched by your employer. Your liabilities, making your same payments, plus the extra $500, are down to $60,000. But look at your net worth. You're now in the black rather than the red in 4 years. Let's look at 8 years. Continuing to put the money into the IRA, so that's the only asset you've got that I've shown here, plus paying down your liabilities. Now you're down to $12,000 after 8 years, and your net worth is almost $90,000. There's an extra bonus. Because of putting that $500 per month extra in, you're going to be saving interest. You're going to pay off your student loans in 8.9 years rather than 20 years, and you're saving yourself $34,233. That's kind of nice. Okay, so forensic accounting, the indirect method of net worth. This is looking at money from illegal and unknown sources. So the IRS uses this to determine if someone has income they haven't paid taxes on. Forensic accountants use it to see if an individual has spent money that they got illegally. So I'm talking from Chicago today, and Al Capone was put in jail on exactly this premise. What they did is they compared his net worth, his assets minus liabilities at the beginning of the year, to his net worth at the end of the year, and saw that his net worth went up by more than the income he had paid taxes on. So the conclusion, and the reason they call it the indirect method, is where did that extra money come from? It must have come from money that he did not pay taxes on. As a result, despite all the murders, he went to jail for tax evasion. So the idea in the indirect method is people have money from their paycheck, and you have two choices that you can do with it. You can either spend it or save it. There's not really a third choice. So if you save it, that's going to increase your net worth. If you spent it, it's going to be part of your expenditures. So we look at the change in net worth, which shows us how much was saved. We add to that the expenses that people had, and that should equal their legitimate income because we've covered everything that was saved and everything that was spent. But if we subtract out their legitimate income and there's money left over, well, you have to ask yourself, where did that money come from? Most likely it came from illegitimate sources. So, how forensic accounting education can help you. In life, all information is not handed to you in a neat package like an accounting problem. Often you have to determine what information you need. Where do you find that information? You're going to have to make assumptions before you can draw some conclusions. You're going to find there's no right answers, and he who defends his assumptions best wins. So in short, forensic accounting can lead to a fun job, or it can enhance your skills for any accounting job. Accountants are often the corporate police in a firm, internal auditors or external auditors. So you need to be able to recognize fraud in the numbers and in the people who would commit fraud. So, you in forensic accounting, if you've thought about graduate school, see if it has some forensic accounting classes. If you find a job, make certain if CPE comes up that has to do with forensic accounting, take those courses. They're fun and interesting, and they will help you. So good luck in your future, and accounting's more exciting than most people realize. Thank you very much.
That's great, and wanted to highlight the slide that you have showing now. You are with DePaul University, and so we thank you for really sponsoring this session and giving us a crash course and overview in forensic accounting. Very interesting, and really appreciate the information. We got some questions coming through, and so I know that we're a little bit limited on time, so as a reminder to everybody, if we're not able to address your questions during the next few minutes, we will get them answered for you after we end the session. So don't hesitate to go ahead and continue putting questions in. Pardon me. So you just ended on a couple of topics there about education and really, I guess, preparation to go into this field. But I think you generated a lot of interest into forensic accounting. And we had a couple of questions around qualifications that an accountant should have to go into forensic accounting. And, you know, if they're a recent undergraduate, graduate, how do you get into this field? What kind of classes are needed? What kind of master's degree would you recommend?
Okay, that's actually a very good question. Years ago, you could not be hired right out of school into the forensic accounting division. I think it was they didn't know that you could actually teach forensic accounting, and yet now we've been doing it for 15 years, and so undergraduates have been hired directly into the forensic division of some of the big four firms. So in order to do that, though, you have to have had some forensic accounting classes. There are some universities out there who have master's degrees in it. And there's some that have courses in it, and that's really important that you take some of those courses. But the easiest way to get in, what I found, is through the government angle. So when I listed those ways that you can get in at the beginning, a lot of people I know that are forensic accountants went to work for 5 years first for maybe the IRS as revenue agents, or some of them went into the FBI or one of the other government agencies. The thing that's really nice about that is, you know, I'll make a plug for the IRS at this point. They give you a lot of training. And so if you have an interest in taxation and forensic accounting, that's a good way to go. So you get a lot of training in being an expert witness, in interrogations, and all of those sorts of things. And people that have done that for even 5 years, they come out and go to work for these forensic accounting firms. So it is possible to go directly in afterwards, but having a master's degree is helpful. Having some experience is helpful. The other way to get in is going first in as an auditor, and then just start making some noise from the very beginning that you're interested in being in the forensic accounting division. And if you've let people know that's your overall interest, a lot of people want you to do some auditing first, especially the big four, just because, so you can have a really firm grasp of exactly what's normal, so that you can then see more easily what is abnormal. So that's what I would say, through auditing, but let them know from the very beginning that's where you want to go, or going directly into governmental work. That makes you very marketable afterwards, even after a few years.
Great. I will list one more question, but in the meantime, Cindy, could you go back to the slide where you listed some books? I think you listed 3 books on one slide a little bit earlier on. I think some of them wanted to write down those books. Okay.
Yeah, they're all good books. Was that the one about lying?
Let me see here.
I think I'm getting there. Don't get dizzy.
All right. So in the meantime, while you're finding that, it's somewhat of a general question, but this might be a good way to sum this up. Someone asked, you know, why should we be concerned, and why are we concerned with fraud in our practice?
Wow. Okay, that's a really good question. Well, Arthur Anderson went down because they didn't detect it. It's a really tough thing because for years in audit, we've just told people that we're going to give some assurance that this fairly represents what's going on in the company. The problem is that's not the perception of people, you know, the public in general. People think that what we are doing is we're checking to make sure that a company doesn't have fraud in it. And so from an audit practice point of view, the better we are at detecting fraud, at helping firms prevent fraud, the safer we're going to be. And also, if you just even want to think about your clients, so say you go to work in a small firm, not one of the big, large public accounting firms. So many small businesses just get taken down by somebody committing fraud or embezzling from them. And so anything that you can do and notice that one of your clients might have fraud going on in their company. And so we tend to think about fraud only in terms of, the people high up in the company are committing it. But when you talk about smaller companies, if they are somebody within the company stealing from the company, that can take the company down. And so you really provide a good service for your clients being able to do that, to detect it.
Great. Okay, well we've reached noon Eastern time, actually a minute or two later, so I'm going to go ahead and close the session. I imagine some people need to go to additional classes or such. Sorry we had a little bit of a delayed start with our screen issues, but thank you so much. You really went through this material in a very interesting way and gave us a lot of information. We appreciate you being here. Everybody in the audience, I appreciate you being here as well. So thank you, and I'll close the session now.
Thank you.
Thank you.